in the glittering glass towers of Wall Street and the silent, historic vaults of the City of London, a curious capitulation is underway. Blinded by the temporary allure of high bond yields and the intoxication of the stock market, Western fund managers have spent the last 2 years doing one thing: liquidating gold. To the modern Western mindset, this yellow metal is merely a barbarous relic, a non-yielding asset to be discarded in favor of the superior US dollar. Millions of ounces have been flooded into the market without hesitation. But pause for a moment. Follow the physical bars. As they leave Western vaults, they aren't vanishing into thin air. They are migrating. While the West sleeps, the East is aggressively awakening. A silent, frantic vacuum is operating out of Beijing and Moscow. The People's Bank of China isn't buying gold to turn a quarterly profit. They are accumulating it with a ferocity not seen in 50 years. The numbers don't lie, and they are screaming a terrifying truth. Between 2020-25 alone, global central banks inhaled over 2,000 tons of net purchases. This is not a statistical anomaly. This is a historic rupture. This phenomenon is the Great Shift. It is a tale of two diverging worlds. The West views gold as a commodity to trade for fiat profit. The East views gold as sovereignty, the only lifeboat to survive a systemic collapse. This is not a trade, it is a rebellion. The East is not buying gold to make a profit in dollars. They are buying gold to get out of dollars. Before our very eyes, gold is shedding its skin as a simple ticker symbol to reclaim its ancient throne as the ultimate money. As physical bullion flows from west to east, it signals that the safety net of the global financial system is being torn apart. The East is hastily building a fortress, while the West is busy selling its own armor, just as the geopolitical house begins to catch fire. To understand the frantic accumulation of bullion in the East, one must look past the trading desks of Shanghai and into the quiet, guarded corridors of Zhongnanhai, the headquarters of the Chinese Communist Party. For decades, the arrangement was simple and symbiotic. China produced cheap goods, the US printed dollars to buy them, and China recycled those dollars back into US Treasury bonds. It was a marriage of convenience. But in late February 2022, the marriage ended. It didn't end with a trade war or a tariff dispute. It ended with a single, terrifying button press in Washington and Brussels. The date February 26, 2022, is etched into the minds of Beijing's strategists. In response to the invasion of Ukraine, the US and its European allies did the unthinkable. They froze over $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves. In an instant, the risk-free status of the US dollar and the euro evaporated. For President Xi Jinping and the PBO, the message was cold and brutal. Your reserves are not truly yours. They are merely a digital entry in a ledger that we control. If you cross a geopolitical red line, we can turn your wealth to zero. This was the wake-up call. Beijing looked at its own balance sheet, trillions of dollars parked in Western debt, and realized they were not holding an asset. They were holding a hostage. They understood, with chilling clarity, that they could not pursue their greatest ambition, the reunification with Taiwan, while their economic lifeblood was stored in the coffers of their potential adversary. As long as China held US treasuries, the US held the kill switch to the Chinese economy. The logic became undeniable. If you plan to challenge the hegemon, you cannot bank with him. The strategy shifted overnight from yield-seeking to sanction-proofing. The PBOC began a covert but aggressive campaign to de-risk. They didn't just want gold, they wanted sovereign gold. Paper gold, ETFs, futures, or unallocated accounts in London is worthless in a kinetic war. It relies on the legal and financial promises of Western institutions. Beijing realized that in a crisis, a contract in London is just paper. Thus began the Great Repatriation. We are witnessing a physical migration of wealth. China is buying bars that sit in vaults in Shanghai and Beijing, guarded by the People's Liberation Army. This is an asset with no counterparty risk. It requires no SWIFT code to settle, no permission from the US Treasury to move, and no internet connection to retain value. It is the only financial asset that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. By swapping US debt for physical gold, China is building a financial bunker, a fortress that allows them to withstand a financial nuclear winter should they be cut off from the dollar system. However, Defense is only half the story. The accumulation of gold is also an offensive maneuver, a sophisticated trap designed to undermine the petrodollar's monopoly. China faces a dilemma. It wants to pay for oil in yuan to bypass the dollar. But major oil producers, like Saudi Arabia and Russia, are hesitant. They know the yuan is a closed currency, heavily manipulated and difficult to move offshore. Why would a Saudi prince sell his oil for a currency he can't freely spend? Enter the Shanghai Mechanism. Beijing has quietly created a backdoor to a gold standard. The pitch to the global south is revolutionary in its simplicity. Sell us your oil, we will pay you in yuan. If you don't want to keep the yuan, you can immediately dump it on the Shanghai Gold Exchange and convert it into physical gold. This is the checkmate. It turns the renminbi into a token that is effectively backed by gold for trade settlement. It solves the trust issue. The Saudis don't need to trust the Chinese Communist Party. They just need to trust that the gold exchange is open. By linking oil, the yuan, and gold, China is creating a closed-loop energy trade that completely bypasses the U.S. banking system. This is the petro-yuan circuit. It allows China to buy energy without dollars, and it allows producers to sell energy without fear of U.S. sanctions. So why now? Because the timeline is accelerating. The frantic gold buying is not speculation. It is preparation. Beijing is draining the West of physical bullion to construct a parallel financial reality. One where trade can flow, armies can be funded, and energy can be secured without ever touching a single U.S. dollar. They are not buying gold to get rich. They are buying gold to gain the freedom to act. In the eyes of Beijing, the era of the dollar is already essentially over. They are simply securing their seats on the lifeboats before the rest of the world realizes the ship is taking on water. If China is the architect of this new financial order, then the nations of the global south are the willing bricklayers. This is no longer a solo rebellion by Beijing. It is a contagion of independence spreading through the veins of the emerging world. The expansion of BRICS Plus is not merely a diplomatic photo opportunity. It is the formation of a trade union for the planet's resource giants. For half a century, the arrangement was unquestioned. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Russia dug the holes, pumped the oil, and harvested the grain. They exported real assets, tangible wealth that powers civilization. In return, they imported paper promises, U.S. Treasury bonds that offered negative real yields and, increasingly, political conditions. But the mood in the boardrooms of the global south has darkened. These nations are collectively asking a dangerous question. Why are we trading the finite wealth of our soil for the infinite debt of a foreign government? They are tired of financing Western deficits. The surplus nations are rejecting the exorbitant privilege of the U.S. dollar. Instead of recycling their trade profits back into Wall Street, they are diversifying into the ultimate neutral collateral, gold. They are trading paper for metal, signaling a return to a philosophy where value is determined by weight, not by fiat decree. However, a return to gold faces a logistical nightmare. Gold is heavy, slow, and expensive to move. You cannot ship bullion for every tanker of oil. This is where the ancient asset meets futuristic technology. Enter the digital rails, CBDCs, and Project M-Bridge. While the West debates the ethics of crypto, the East is building a high-speed highway for money that completely bypasses New York. Project Bridge is the prototype of this new nervous system, a multi-central bank digital currency platform. It allows a Thai exporter to sell rice to a UAE buyer, settling instantly using digital tokens backed by their central banks without a single US dollar clearing through a correspondent bank in Manhattan. The vision is terrifyingly simple for the defenders of the status quo. A decentralized trade network where gold serves as the final store of value in the vault, and CBDCs serve as the lightning-fast delivery vehicles on the wire. The global south is not trying to destroy the dollar. They are simply building a parallel ecosystem where the dollar is no longer needed. They are constructing a world where if the West shuts the doors, the East can simply open their own windows and keep doing business. However, to declare the death of the dollar today is not analysis. It is fantasy. We must step back from the brink of hyperbole and look at the cold, hard architecture of the global financial system. The dollar is not merely a currency. It is the operating system of the planet. and you cannot uninstall an operating system overnight without crashing the entire machine. The United States possesses a weapon even more powerful than its aircraft carriers: the depth of its bond market. Imagine a global fund manager sitting in Tokyo or Zurich with $50 billion to invest. They cannot dump that money into gold. The market is too small. They cannot dump it into the Chinese yuan. The capital controls are too tight, and the rule of law too opaque. They cannot dump it into the euro. The market is too fragmented. There is only one swimming pool deep enough for the whales of global finance to swim in without draining the water: the U.S. Treasury market. This is the network effect. Roughly 88% of all foreign exchange transactions involve the dollar. It is the language of global commerce. Even when a Brazilian buys coffee from a Vietnamese farmer, the price is often referenced in dollars. This inertia is a powerful force. The dollar will not vanish because it is hated. It remains because for now it is irreplaceable. Therefore, the collapse will not look like a Hollywood disaster movie. There will be no single day when the dollar hits zero. Instead, we should look to history, specifically the twilight of the British pound sterling. After World War I, the pound didn't disappear. It simply faded. It slowly lost its privilege. It went from being the only currency that mattered to being just one of many. We are moving toward a similar bifurcation, a great splintering of the world. We are not heading for a Chinese monopoly, but a multipolar disorder. In the West, the G7 will continue to transact in dollars and euros, clutching their familiar system. In the East and South, a new bloc will trade in local currencies, settled in gold, and cleared via new digital rails. The dollar becomes less global and more regional. It transforms from the world reserve currency to the Western reserve currency. It is a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow bleed of relevance rather than a sudden heart attack. But the greatest threat to the dollar does not come from the gold vaults of Shanghai or the oil fields of Riyadh. The call is coming from inside the house. The dollar's most dangerous enemy is Washington, D.C. The United States has weaponized its currency, violating the cardinal rule of banking, neutrality. By proving that dollar reserves can be frozen, the U.S. damaged the trust that underpins fiat money. But worse than the weaponization is the mathematics. With a national debt spiraling past $35 trillion and interest payments on that debt exceeding the defense budget, the U.S. is caught in a debt spiral. The only way to pay the bills is to print more money. This is the fiscal dominance endgame. The world sees this. They see a hegemon that must debase its currency to survive. The dollar will not collapse against other fiat currencies, because the euro and yen are in even worse shape, but it will collapse against hard assets. The reality is stark. The dollar will survive as a medium of exchange, but it is dying as a store of value. The king will keep his throne, but his kingdom is shrinking, and his treasury is effectively empty. The tectonic plates of history have finally shifted. What we are witnessing is not a mere fluctuation in asset prices, but a fundamental re-rating of global trust. Gold is shedding its skin once again. It is no longer just a shiny metal for jewelry or a static hedge against the consumer price index. It has reclaimed its ancient title as geopolitical money, the only asset that requires no signature, no promise, and no permission to possess. As the East stacks bars to build a new floor for the global price, the days of cheap gold are likely behind us forever. As for the dollar, do not expect a sudden funeral. The greenback will remain the currency of your salary, your taxes, and your grocery bill, but its soul is eroding. It will continue to exist, but it will command less and less of the real world. We are entering an era of asset inflation, where the nominal price of everything rises as the purchasing power of the fiat unit melts away like an ice cube in the summer sun. So what is the lesson for the individual standing at this historical crossroads? The message is clear. In a world of fragmenting trust, you must become your own central bank. Do not store your life's accumulated energy solely in financial assets, which are merely the debts of strangers. Shift toward real assets, things that exist without a counterparty. Do not bet on the total collapse of the American empire. That is a dangerous wager, but do bet against the integrity of paper money. The giants are moving their chips to the physical table. The question is, Are you merely watching the game, or are you playing it? Subscribe now to stay ahead of the times, because when history is written, you'll want to be among the few who recognized what was coming early. Thank you for watching and being part of the journey.